I have only 2 copies, I don't know, which that I've left in my archive, and one of them was used for designing the poster. So, the first book, as I was starting to say, that is in print, is only about one third of the original manuscript. And the reason that it was so much longer is because since I was innovating in so many ways, and in so many ways giving a different interpretation to some of the ancient texts, or saying that this text, when it refers to planetary matters, means this and that, because all the assumptions by astronomers and other scholars was that any astronomical text, and there are countless of them, amazingly, from ancient times, has to be understood in terms of the ancient peoples not knowing about any planet beyond Saturn, because they couldn't see it. But the fact is that both Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, yes, Pluto, are listed and mentioned and are part of the epic of creation. So, in order to prove my point, I said, well, here's this text from this tablet, and then there's this text from that tablet, and then there's that text from that tablet. And so there were always at least three examples, 3 ancient sources to support what I was claiming, what I was saying. And the editor, a young woman whose name I remember, Mary Solberg, because she, after they decided to publish the book, she disclosed to me that her father is a Christian minister, I forget which denomination, and she said, before I recommended to the publisher that we publish the book, I went to my father and told him what the book is about, and to see what he would say. And she told me, he said to me, Mary, this book must be published. So I remember what she said, and I remember her name. But she said to me, look, this book that you're writing is for the general public, for you people, you're the general public. And after reading whatever, 1 chapter, 2 chapters, 3 chapters, the reader will have to make up her mind. And that is, do you, Zechariah Sitchin, know what you are talking about? If they decide that you know what you are talking about, you don't have to convince them by saying, here is a tablet, and here is a tablet, and here is a tablet. Why did I do that? I said to her, because as I was writing, I was typing, feeling as if this scholar, say, Dr. Kramer, whom I consider my mentor, stands here, and another one, I won't mention his name, very important one too. I won't mention his name because he told me once, of course you are right, but we cannot say so. So they were standing here, and as I was saying, well, this is such and such way to understand it, they would say, wait a minute, but that's the only one. I said, no, it's not the only one, there's another one and another. So she said, forget it, because those who know those texts will know right off that you're right or will disagree with you. So for the general public, just write. if they decide that you don't know what you're talking about, they'll drop the book, even if it's mentioned, repeated 3 times. So it was 1/3. And the main thing that was omitted was any reference, there's none in the 12th planet, to the other great civilization that came a few hundred years later, but was a great one, that's of Egypt, with all its pyramids and temples and textbook of the dead and all the rest. So, so the 12th planet was followed by the Stairway to Heaven, which brought into the embrace the Egyptian data, civilization, information, and also dealt with who built the pyramids and the aspirations of mankind at the time to attain the immortality, the relative immortality of the gods by joining them on their planet. Then another book followed, because the material that's available was expanding. I used to spend virtually every weekend at the New York Public Library. On Saturdays, I would go to the New York Public Library and spend there from opening to closing. On Sundays, I would go to the Jewish Theological Seminary, not far from here, because it is closed on Saturdays and open on Sundays. And then I would spend weeks at a time, at least 4 or 5 times a year, 10 days to 2 weeks at a time in London at the British Museum, where the great advantage is that on one floor or the second floor, but anyway, on one side of the museum you have all the finds that are in the British Museum. There's some, of course, in other museums. You have them, and then you can go to the famous British Library in the famous Rotunda, and you can read the research and the translations and the interpretations. So you could sit here and study and then walk out and see it for yourself, and even touch some of those exhibits and use a magnifying glass to read the inscriptions and so on. So one book followed another, and it became a series, the Earth Chronicles series. As I was writing and expanding all these subjects, I one day came to the editor at Avon Books, not at the first publisher, and told him that I feel, literally I told him, I said, I feel like bursting. I really feel like bursting. For example, I said, last evening, we were watching the transmission from Uranus, the spacecraft, if you recall, NASA spacecraft at some point were reaching the outer planets. And I say the planet looks exactly the way the Sumerians described it. And it's on page such and such of the 12th planet of the first book, etc. And then there were all these advances in genetics, you know, the cloning, the first test tube baby. I said, that's exactly the way the Sumerians said that the genetic engineering had taken place that brought us about. And I said, you know, I really said, what can I do about it? So he said, write a book. And thus, out of the series, or away from the series, indeed in the very same year, 1990, that they published one of the series books, and they published the so-called companion book, Genesis Revisited, that really took, on the one hand, all the biblical data, which is in effect Sumerian data, and compared it to all our scientific advances until that date, 1990, including what was discovered on Mars, including the famous face and other structures, etc. So there was this companion book, Genesis Revisited, and thus it was followed one after the other.